But yes, you're already naming yourself headline crest news. It's supposed to be the crest of news headlines. So why are you taking another step calling yourself Backroom Analysis? Well, headlines can cover a large area, the breadth of news stories. What the backroom analysis is supposed to do is identify and call out some particular areas and give you more of an in-depth view of what's going on inside. Some members of the audience, just to be candid, they know a lot of stuff from the practical experience, maybe that they underwent or seen things firsthand. Veterans, for example, of the military, veterans, law enforcement, even if they didn't spend 5 or 6 years in a college or university going through the historical timeline or development of something like the drug war or the different kinds of narcotics that are out there requiring a chemistry degree. Okay, they already know these things without it. So if you're sitting in front of your screen and you want to get the gist of a story and you want to know what the parts and pieces are fast, that's what this is. So for those that don't have time to slow walk 6, 7, 10 years through a college curriculum being taught by someone that maybe wasn't even alive when you experienced firsthand what actually went on, then that's what we're going to do here, is we're going to crunch everything together and give you the power punch. Once again, I'm not going to try to punch so hard that there's a backlash and people are upset and people knocking on my door, literally asking me why am I sitting up talking about this stuff out in public. Okay? Pretty much everything that I'm going to bring to your attention has already been brought to your attention in some form or another in public information. It's all about the arrangement of the information, how it's presented, and how it's said. Spillover from immigration issues, the drug problem. Drugs, a problem in itself. When I say the drug problem in this presentation, I'm talking about illegal narcotics and illegally abused narcotics, such as well-known names of cocaine, heroin, opiates, and meth. This video is not focused on what is referred to these days as big pharma and dependency on painkillers. This video is more concerned with the drugs like the ones sold on the street that are highly likely to have originated from south of the continental U.S. border. What is the objective of this movie? Number one, keep deadly narcotics out of this country. That's number one. Number two, for those that are going to be on board with that program, it'll help if we have a clear idea of what it is that we're fighting and the different dynamics that are involved and making sense of it all. We can crystallize what the enemy is. A long-standing objective is to make certain that chemicals, plants, drugs that would ordinarily be okay for human consumption are not abused. When drug and narcotic trafficking from south of the border into the U.S. becomes a free-for-all, it's easy to see where the mitigation of the problem becomes much harder when, one, you can't see how much it is that's coming in and what it is that's coming in. I'm going to try to steer away from a popular format that you find on video platforms where they will break everything down to a specific number of reasons, like reason number one, this, that. Reason number two, here's the third most popular, whatever. Okay? The set of elements, and pretty much everybody knows them, especially folks that have been following newspapers for a while. The set of elements all kind of overlap and interface with each other and have sub branches and so forth. So I'm just going to kind of say them as they are. And if there's a number one and a number two, then we'll put that out there as it fits in. The last episode that we had here on Backroom Analysis had to do with immigration, and that there's so many aspects and there's huge myriad of immigration issues that it's said that it's often contrasted into the goings on in Mexico. Drugs coming out to the border of Texas through Mexico and Central America. To put it more broadly, drugs coming up from south of the border into the southern parts of the United States or anywhere in the United States is a big element in the rationale of border control. So that's our linchpin to this episode, okay? Walking you through it, the first episode, we talked about the three most protuberant issues going on right now. COVID among them, drug use among them. In the second episode, we talked about immigration, and we tried to steer away from being so focused on just the Mexico-Texas border, okay, in the attempt to illustrate that it's much more than that. However, because the situation is as major that it is presented to be, especially through media, it's kind of hard to just totally skip over. So in episode 3, this episode, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the correlation of narcotics as a potentiality coming into the southern borders, and in doing so, we're going to point to somewhere between several and a handful of elements that comprise why continual narcotic production with respect to possibility of it coming into the United States is a continued problem. What the continued problems are, as well as the obvious, such as how it affects not only just taxpayers, but then each and every tax-paying household. An original idea for this movie was to focus on how each U.S. household, especially in taxpayers' dollars, is affected by drugs emanating from south of the border. But since it's more than that, and taxpayers' dollars is common knowledge.
This is ABC News Nightline.
Good evening. Tonight we focus on a flower and on its lethal impact. It reaches America from several origins through many ports, of course, but nowhere does it flow more freely into the country than through New York City. And from there into the arms and the bloodstreams of thousands of addicts all over the nation, including perhaps your hometown.
Set forth are more direct explanations. One of the scariest things a child can go through, I'm talking about 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. I remember looking at the photo of a 9-year-old girl from Guatemala sitting in the back of a paddy wagon after she somehow or another made her way into the United States through Mexico. This is within the past few days here in February of 2021. Okay, looking at everything, trying to make sure that we had the right information. That's a very frightening experience to be all of maybe 40 to 60 pounds, still in single digits, and to be sitting in this great big paddy wagon with iron bars meant to take down grown men up around 200 pounds with all kinds of unheard of physical capacities. Now, she was over here probably because she had to literally run for her life from some kind of oppressive situation, either back home or in her original place where she came from, or maybe a makeshift dwelling on the way that perhaps her family, if her family is still alive or not, taken hostage or whatever the case. I mean, there's a myriad of possibilities. So there's something that's happening back where that little girl, amongst many others, had to make their escape. So what's going on? And this is where we're going to string together the households all over the United States are being affected by what's going on, in some cases hundreds or maybe even thousands of miles away. So at some of the farthest extremes, let's say New York, and the distance between there and Guatemala or Central America, or the Honduras, where sometimes there's some high pressure situations. You take another town like Seattle, in the distance from there to Central and South America. That's a long ways in terms of number of miles, but it's not a long ways in terms of the correlation between your taxpayers' dollars and activities going on that your taxpayers' dollars are applied to or affect how much in taxes you have to pay. Let me give you some clear illustrations. If U.S. anti-narcotic forces need $1 million to go on a mission to suppress some non-stop entity from trafficking drugs, there's a certain amount of taxpayers' dollars that are going to become involved with that basic theory structure. Okay? Now, let's say that non-stop entity decides to become 10 times as powerful in an attempt to continue to traffic drugs. So to fight that, U.S. forces say, okay, well, we need $1 million times 10. So now we're up to $10 million. What does that mean to taxpayers? Well, that means their tax-paying money that they have to put out, or what gets deducted from their paycheck, is now 10 times bigger. Now, obviously, that kind of math doesn't happen that simply on your paycheck, at least for most of us. But just so that you can get the picture here, is that the more money that's going, the fighting the evils of illicit drugs, the more money is being taken out of your paycheck that could go to putting more books on desks in classrooms. That's more money that could be spent to put a larger lunch in your kid's lunchbox when you send them off to school. Okay, there are countless Americans that not only aren't going to school, can't go to school because they don't have the money, but don't even have books for school. So when they go to school, they don't even have a book in front of them. Making efficient use of these dollars is obviously critical. The issues of efficiency is not what this is talking about. This is talking about the root evil of drug cultivation in locations outside of the United States by people that are outside of Americans, okay, other than Americans, that are purposely cultivating the drug crop under the guidance of the left and evil. Okay, it's costing American households money, and it's a very practical, pragmatic situation where it's detracting from your everyday household's ability to raise their families properly. Here are a few major areas drugs are impacted. We, us, people, groups, communities, either got funding held back or never got it in the first place. Money went to the war on drugs, basically. The absurd amount of money to attend to the medical needs caused by drug use, meaning drug abuse. Can we be rest assured that none of that money that's used on medical expenses comes from taxpayers' pockets? Disappearance from manpower, absenteeism, truancy. There could have been contributors to the workforce, the economy, employment numbers, to the sports world, athletes, students, potential actors and actresses, scientists, and technological advance. Where did they go? The number of victims of drugs has devastated the potential of where we could be. As a substrate, the cycle of dependency that has trapped the huge numbers of individuals that it has sucked potential contributors out of the workplace and into an economic world of their own, often leaving parameters and ceilings with little to no room for growth and upward movement, and few alternatives, where some turn to drugs again in their hope. Money that could be spent on education to teach ways to get out of the drug predicament, or alternatives to drug use when initially used for medical reasons. I'm talking about instead of moving into a dependency for opiates just a week or two after being released from the hospital for something medical, perhaps there's some other alternatives. The money that we could be using to open up those doors plausibly is going to fight the war on drugs. And sometimes in seemingly rudimentary ways that might only have a fraction of an ideal level of success. When doing a little background research in prep for this movie, it was found that Venezuela has had some trouble in it when it comes to drug trafficking, and they come down on it there. What this also points to is, and as the article was explaining, Venezuela is one of the stops along the way for drug traffickers, where drug traffickers are taking drugs from one place and then they're stopping through Venezuela en route to someplace else. Evident is that someplace else could very well be the United States. What this leads to is the United States is seen as a market, an ideal market for drugs for some reason. And one of those reasons is the perceived stability of the economy here. Basically, a drug dealer can make more money on selling drugs in the United States than in some other places. Now, there's a reason for that. There's a reason why the United States got to be the stable economy that it is, regardless of its ups and downs and challenges. One of those reasons are that there's some hard-working Americans, and a lot of them. They get up, they go to work every single day, especially during the work week. So we're talking about people that go to the auto factory early in the morning and they work until sometime in the evening. Firemen, teachers, everybody in the economic societal fabric here. And that's where this strong economy, or that's one of the major driving forces to result in this strong economy that we have. It wouldn't be here without it, essentially. It's not fair to them that the U.S. is now the strong economy where it's an attractive market because the value of the dollar is higher than some other places. It's being worked off of their backs. So now umpteen drug dealers want to come to the United States to sell drugs and destroy their kids, their nieces and nephews and what have you. So let's go back. The original point of departure with the drug crop in the United States. Had it not been for the economy, like we said, that whole scenario might not exist. That's where, again, hardworking Americans have the right to say, look, we need to point to drug traffickers and the whole cultivation process of using drugs for illicit activities as their business. Because had that not have been here, had the drug farms not have been here, when I'm talking about drug farms, I'm talking about people that set drug farms up for the explicit purpose of eventually selling drugs in the United States. Had those folks not have been here, or on the earth, okay, then maybe those nieces and nephews that are being approached by drug dealers in their small towns, maybe that wouldn't have happened. So now it is hardworking American. Those drug farms are now their business too. Criminal justice costs. Imagine a pro football or basketball player signs a 1-year contract for $1 million. Multiply that figure by 1,000. That's 1 billion. There's a saying, you can't count to 1 billion in a lifetime. There might be 1,000 players in a major ball league that could possibly be on a playing field on any given sports weekend. The amount of things that can be done or could be done with $1 million. Then $1 billion. Just think of it for a moment. Schools being built, cars purchased, houses and mansions established. And times 1 billion by about 60. That's a rough estimate of how much money is spent in a year on drug-related criminal justice costs, according to the White House in recent years. When trying to grasp envision $60 billion doing something and what it all did and where exactly all the money went, one might see it is as if drugs is getting a grip on America. The contrast illustration is America reaching down and getting a grip on drugs. World relations. Maintaining world relations at the level that deals with humaneness and being forthright, and I guess a word to describe, to picture what I'm getting at, might be pure. Geographic borders might exist, let's say between countries and nations, but not all of the ones that we see today might have always been there. Reputation. The U.S. is holding on to a reputation as the wealthiest country in the world, the land of opportunity, land of the free, a democracy. Meanwhile, it has to contend with narcotic-related statistics that are, well, unfavorable. Any kind of narcotic statistics are going to be unfavorable. I'm talking in reference to, let's take for example, a certain number of arrests per every certain amount of seconds for drug possession. Such and such a proportion of a segment of society are in jail. The numbers of overdoses each year and sheer number of narcotic purchases averaged per minute. Other nations out there, including ones that have markedly more of the crops that big name narcotics are produced from, I'm talking about like cocaine, are saying that they have much less of a drug problem by their own people than the USA. Questions get asked when the U.S. has undergone numerous government shutdowns, as they call it, financial impasses we're talking about, in the past several decades. Weaknesses and failures is not something to acquiesce and say whatever is being done and not done to mitigate the drug problem is the epitome of economic brilliance. Especially when the U.S. suffered over 25 million cases of COVID-19 in year 2020. Chances are, strong chances, had the drug problem not been as severe, at least to strengthen the fight against coronavirus, could have been improved. There is room for improvement in just about every human and civilization process.